Alright, so here we are, cumulative frequency curves. I said in the previous video that cumulative frequency is all over the IB exam. The cumulative frequency curves are really all over the exam. There are two styles of problems. In one style, they give you the graph and they ask you questions, and in the other style, they ask you to make the graph and then ask you questions. In this video, I'm just going to talk about examples where they give you the graph. So this curve you're looking at here is a cumulative frequency curve. Cumulative frequency curves are basically always S-shaped. Sometimes they'll be, sort of a steeper S, sometimes they'll be more gradual, sometimes they'll have less of an S-shape, sometimes they'll really look S-shaped. But they won't ever curve back because that's not a function. That would be crazy. But the first thing I'm going to do in this first slide is sort of talk about, so like, what the heck is this thing? So you've seen them all over the place. What is it? I think one easy way to think about this thing is to have us rewrite this as a cumulative frequency chart, right? So if on this side I put, minutes, and on this side I put number of students. Sorry for my terrible handwriting, but we'll survive. We could say something like, okay, how many students spent between 0 and, let's say, 20 minutes on Facebook, right? The idea is you could look at this and say, well, between 0 and 20, 20 goes up to sort of right, and I should even be drawing this on, 20 sort of goes up and then comes across right here. That number is 7. Okay, so there were 7 students that spent 20 minutes or less on Facebook, right? Now, what about next? My next one would be 0 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to, say, 40. Well, let's take a look at 40. 40 minutes, if you follow up to the curve, seems to hit right there at about, looks like 25. Okay, great. So there are 25 students, and notice all 25 of these people, all 25 of these were less than 40 minutes. And that only means, like 18 of them were in here between 20 and 40, but this is a cumulative frequency, right? Continuing with my theme of using different colors, what about 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 60? You should pause the video. You should do this on your own here, right? If we go over to 60, right, 60 minutes, if we follow 60 all the way up, and then sort of carefully over, you should see that's, it's 3 ticks below 50, so that looks like 47. Great, so there are 47 students who are 60 minutes or less. And then finally, my last one here, I guess I'll use this purple color. 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 80 minutes. As high as my chart goes, 80 goes all the way up, hits the function, and I didn't draw that very straight because I'm going in a hurry, but there are 60 students who spend between 0 and 80 minutes. So the idea is this chart, this curve rather, is simply a graphical representation of the cumulative frequency table that we have already seen. Okay? It shows the total number of students and then a distribution of, up to a maximum number of minutes that are possibly spent on Facebook. So that's where these graphs come from. In the next slide, I'm going to go through an example where I actually ask you questions about it. So let's take a look at that next. Before I go to the next slide, by the way, this business of drawing lines on the cumulative frequency curve, that totally counts as showing your work. If a question like this is on the IB exam and they're giving you something like this and you're notating it in a booklet, writing these lines on there is totally partial credit. Okay? So let's get to this example I have. So I actually have the exact same graph. I'm just going to ask questions about it now. First question I'm going to ask, very, very easy question. What is the median amount of time spent on Facebook daily? Right? What does median mean? Median doesn't mean middle, it doesn't mean, 40, that's the middle one. Median means if you were to line up all of the times, all the people, all of these things, and take the middle one, how much time would that be? Well, my thought is, we have 60 people that were surveyed here. So the median person, the middle person, would be the 30th person, right? So how much time did the 30th person spend? Well, if I take 30 and draw over to the curve, and then draw down from there. And that one actually looks like it sort of fell in between the two lines. We'll do the best we can here. Now, one of the things you really have to pay attention to here is scale. I'm going from 40 to 60, and if you count these out, and I know it's really hard to see on your screen probably, there are sort of 5 boxes here and 5 boxes here. So it's 10 boxes to go a total of 20 units. So each one of these boxes is sort of 2 units. Long story short, this line came down and hit at 45. It was 40, 42, 44, and then halfway more is 45. So the median amount of time spent on Facebook is 45 minutes. On the IB exam, by the way, they usually accept these answers plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 2. So if you had said 44 or 46, it's okay. What they're not going to be okay with is 42. If you're like, oh, look, it was 40 and then 2 more ticks, they're going to expect you to be able to count, how much each box is worth, as it were. So the median amount of time spent on Facebook, 45 minutes. Next, what is the interquartile range of the data? Well, how are we supposed to find interquartile range? Interquartile range is supposed to be the range between the two quartiles. Right, so think about how, like we just talked about how to find the median. We just discussed that the median is halfway down from 60, so that's 30. So how will you find the lower quartile? It should be very similar. How will you find the lower quartile and how will you find the upper quartile? I'd really recommend you pause the video and think about that for a minute and then listen to my answer. Remember that the lower quartile is supposed to be like the median of the lower half of the data. Well, this is the lower half of the data. I'll use purple. This is the lower half of the data. So what's halfway between 0 and 30? 15 is halfway between those. So if I follow that over, my Q1 value is this guy right here. My first quartile value is 30 minutes. Now that you've seen that, everybody should be able to find the Q3 value. I'm going to do that with blue. So if you haven't already done so, pause the video, find Q3 for yourself. Q3 should be the median of the upper half of the data, so between 30 and 60, that's 45. So if I follow from 45 over to here, and then down, again, I'm sort of trying to follow this line carefully. That was 1 tick mark to the left of 60. Each tick mark is worth 2, so this is 58. So the interquartile range is 58 minus 30. Interquartile range is 28. Okay. The next question is a very, very, very common question on the exam, so make sure you pay close attention to this one. It says 10% of students spend more than X minutes on Facebook daily. Find the value of X. So 10% of the students. So how many of these students are we talking about? Well, there are 60 students total that I'm looking at up here. So 10% of 60, I'm going to have to scroll this graph up just a little bit. 10% of 60, 0.10 times 60 is 6 students. And I'm saying that 6 students spend more than a certain amount of time on Facebook. So I'm basically looking for what is the value of the top 6 students. So it's almost like you're saying, well, here's 60 up here. Let's count down 6 students. Right, here it is. We can follow that over to the graph and then down. Again, trying to follow this line. So I'm 2 tick marks left of 70, so that's 66. Looks to me like that's 66 minutes. I just thought of one more question I want to ask here, so I'm going to type that out below, and then we'll scroll back up to the graph. So that's incoming. So my new question is, what percentage of students spends less than 50 minutes on Facebook daily? I'm going to scroll back up to the graph now, and I hope that you guys will get a chance to try and think about this one on your own, because I'd really like you to give it a shot. Right? So what percentage of students spends less than 50 minutes on Facebook daily? So the way that we're going to have to do this problem is I'm going to have to sort of look at, okay, where is 50 minutes? Here's the 50-minute mark, right? I don't know if that color is really visible. We'll just use black. If I follow 50 minutes up to my curve and then over, the number of students that fall into that category is 35 students. So they want to know how many people spend less than 50 minutes. So that means there are 35. If it was more than 35, you'd be looking at between 35 and 60. They want less than 50 minutes, so we're going downward from there. That's 35 students. So for percentage, you'd have to do 35 out of 60, and we'll have to use a calculator for that. So if this was on a non-calculator, portion, they give you something you can do by hand. This ends up being 0.583 repeating, so it's 58.3 repeating percent of students fall into that category. That's really what they ask for these questions. I think I'm going to do one more example of that after in this video, so if you need to see more examples, go on and see those. Otherwise, please start the problems, do some of them on your own. Okay, I really don't want this other example to run too long, but I did want to give you guys a chance to look at another problem. I really, really would recommend that you guys try and do this problem on your own, at least try and do part A and then part B and part C, as I'm going through them, just so you can see whether or not you're getting the idea. So the setup here is that you've got the lengths of 150 extended essays that are represented in the cumulative frequency curve over here on the left. My first question is find the interquartile range of the data. Okay. So pause, think about that for a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. All right, so the interquartile range, so first we got to figure out where the median is, right? Our median is, well, if there's 150 scores total, our median is here at 75, and the first quartile would be at half of 75. Half of 75 is 37.5. So, we're approximating here. This is 30. This is probably about 37.5. So, again, halfway. If I sort of follow this over, and then follow this down, and again, I'm more interested here in the setup of this thing than anything else. So it looks like we're just past 2,800, and if you think about the scale down here in the bottom, this is 2,800, 2,900, 3,000, 3,100, 3,200. So, if your screen is big enough, you're seeing these little marks. It looks like each one of those marks is probably another 10. So I'm seeing that Q1 value as being about, I don't know, 2,830. Now, what about the third quartile, right? If you're looking between 75 and 150, let's see if you average those, 112.5. So again, you're sort of looking at in between there. Follow this over to the function and down. This one is looking like it's about 30, maybe 3230. So if we subtract those, the interquartile range is 400. 400, right? So that's my interquartile range. So if you got that one, yay, great. Next question, again, one that I want you guys to try on your own. It says that 20% of students wrote essays over P words long, and I want you to find the value of P. Looks like I can't erase all those lines. So again, pause the video, try this one on your own. I'll do this one here in green. So 20% of students. So first of all, how many is 20% of the students? There's 150 students times 0.2, that's 30 students. So 30 students wrote essays over P words long. So that means I need to count 30 students down from the top. That's 120. So this is sort of the cutoff for the top 20%, right? So those top 20% essays, in terms of length, doesn't necessarily mean they got a high score. And I tried to draw that straight. Seems to come down, I don't know, looks like about 3,260 words. That seems like that's over about 6 marks. So that was the length of the essay to be in the top 20% in terms of length. The last part, again, I'd really recommend you guys pause the video and try this one on your own. What percentage of students submitted essays that were between 2,500 and 3,000 words? Okay, so, and again, I hope you're doing this on your own. 2,500 words is right there. That seems like that was about 4 students, maybe. 3,000 words, this is 3,000. 3,000 words, oh, that's a nice easy number there. That one's 75. So it looks like there were 75 minus 4, which is 71 students out of 150. And if we do 71 divided by 150, I get 0.473 bar. So if they want the percentage of students, you're looking at 47.3% of the students submitted essays in that length. So hopefully this made sense. Hopefully you guys are in a position where you can start working through these cumulative frequency curve problems. I'll say again right here at the end of the video, these are all over the place in the IB exam. They're really, really common questions, so make sure you've got a strong sense of this. I'll see you in class.